Hey guys, Peter, CEO of BlueAlpha. I'm very excited to also show you the extension of our current BlueAlpha Marketing Plugin, where we just released our first MCP, which allows you to actually chat with your Meridian marketing mix models. And we've built multiple skills for it that you can actually just call. For all BlueAlpha customers, this is already available to chat within, like for example, Claude or like Codex or every other AI workspace that you actually use. But also we have an option if you, for example, did not partner with us, but you have your own that you can actually upload your own into the MCP and talk to it. Extremely helpful for like data scientists or data scientists that want to expose their trace to their marketing team. There's a whole tutorial on how to actually install the plugin. It's pretty straightforward. We have a GitHub repo, which is public, which you can just go click on the latest release and then download the plugin, upload the plugin, for example, via add files here, and then just like install it to me. Or if you use the CLI terminal, then you can also like just install it via the CLI terminal. All of this is actually outlined in the GitHub repo on how to install it. Pretty straightforward. But what I wanted to show you, and I'm showing you this live right now, is do you have access to the Alpha Marketing Plugin, how to actually use it. Second. And then we can actually run through some of the skills that we've put together and start to look at what you can do with it. The BlueAlpha Marketing Plugin actually has the MCP. Can you, one second, show me all the skills that we have? Give me sure what they can do. So we actually have an MCP, but we also have a Google Ads MCP, which connects automatically to your Google Ads account and lets you run, for example, deep dives, audits, creative fatigue analysis, anything basically you want to run on top of your Google Ads account. We're also releasing TikTok, Meta, and LinkedIn later today. And this is all actually done via our BlueAlpha MCP, where you can just like sign up and authenticate yourself, and you don't need any, like for example, credentials, API tokens, and so on. You can just like chat to all of your data within Claude. But for this particular tutorial, I would like to talk about the skills that we have here. Which are, we have an health check, which basically trust creates a Meridian before you act on it, checks convergence, predominance, model fit, known failures, and run the first to answer, can I trust this model? Question. Then we have another skill, which we call trust router, which is a per channel classifier that tells you which channels you can act on directly from the versus, for example, which need an incrementality test first. This is like, after you run the health check and actually build trust into the model, now you can actually go one level deeper of like, okay, are there channels where we have high confidence in? And if yes, can we just make changes, for example, immediately? Or which channels, for example, if you have high multicollinearity across your different channels, right, and they always move the same, is that even the best model cannot accurately depict or like basically tell you what is working, what is not. We have a high confidence intervals, we have quite some uncertainty, and this then starts to infuse, okay, hey, let's actually build out an incrementality testing roadmap, right? And how does this look like? So this is the trust router skill. Then we also look into saturation report, which is like looking at diminishing returns versus which channels do actually still have headroom. Extremely useful to understand or answer the question, where's my next dollar going? And also steer the conversation with finance of like, hey, you want us to scale, for example, Google further, but we actually see that Google, we reached our saturation point. So now what we need to do is we either need to look for more top of funnel channels to open up the funnel to make the bottom funnel channels actually like more effective, or potentially or actually perform an entire deep dive on the Google account of understanding why is that channel saturated and can we do anything to actually like unlock more room to grow. An example would be you have maybe 2 campaigns, and these 2 campaigns, 90 or like most of their budget that this actually spends goes to a particular product, SKU, audience, whatever, and then actually using the Google Ads MCP to also like perform this deep dive of understanding. Maybe it makes sense to actually create more campaigns and start targeting different audiences, different products, and so on to actually create more headroom. So that's obviously there's a follow-up from the saturation report. Then we have a channel deep dive, which is just looking into full single channel read, combining ROI, marginal ROI, saturation, Adstock, weekly contribution, power, posterior diagnostics, and like basically it's just this one deep dive into tell me everything you know about Meta from the MMM or Google, for example, that you then can start to pair with the Meta, Google, TikTok MCPs. We also have a budget allocator, which starts to simulate specific budget shifts through the Meridian simulator. We have a scenario planner as well, right? So after you have, for example, a different budget allocation, let's actually run certain scenarios on this. We have an attribution reconciler, which actually cross-references your MMM channel ROI against platform data. For now, this works only for Google because Google, we already have the MCP. But as I said, we're releasing Meta, TikTok, LinkedIn, X later this week. And then we'll continue to actually like release other MCPs to actually become like this cross-reference point as well. There's also one skill that I'm particularly excited about, which is actually launch timing. Because what the MMM helps you understand is like, if we launch a channel today, when can we actually start to expect the full impact and effect, right? And it's looking at, for example, Adstock and decay with the saturation curves to actually project time to peak, half-life, and steady state, and answers basically the question, if I start turning on this channel now, when will I see the impact of my changes? Then we have a performance digest, which is like a weekly or monthly readout in the BlueAlpha narrative format of what happened, what drove it, what to watch. Great as a recap or executive review for your leadership and so on. And then we also have an MMM test roadmap skill, which builds a prioritized quarterly incrementality testing calendar from the trust router output, giving you test budgets and concurrent test cap. So there will be individual articles that actually highlight each of these individual skills, but just want to show you this, for example, live right now. And let's start with the MMM health check and then move to the MMM trust router to ultimately build MMM test roadmap. As a side note, would be interesting to get some idea on when we launch these channels or like tests, how long it would take before we see any impact, because that will ultimately help actually determine the testing length as well using the MMM launch timing skill. Great, let's fire this off. Spare you of the entire loading time. So, but what I just wanted to show you is that we actually start to see here the connectors, which is like the BlueAlpha connector, right, which is our BlueAlpha MCP. There's also a full tutorial on how to actually set this up. It takes 30 seconds. Just go to settings, custom connectors, type in BlueAlpha MCP, and then our URL, and then you can like register. And now what you start to see, it's actually starting to pull the individual functions that make up the skills. And we actually have one model available, which is a net sales model. This is actually a demo account or like a demo model that we've built because we obviously cannot show you real client data. But now it will start to actually perform each of these individual functions that make up the skill for our net sales MMM. And I'll make sure to show you the results once all of this loaded. All right, the first results of the MMM health check actually loaded. Overall trust grade only is C. And the model is usable for directional ROI reads, but not for fine-tuned budget allocation. And a couple of reasons for this is that we have curve-shaped parameters that Adstock and saturation are prior dominated across the board. Training data is 28 weeks stale, and the holdout strategy isn't actually documented, right? This actually sets up the test roadmap nicely. Almost everything needs an incrementality test before acting. This might read as a starting point like, oh my God, have we done something wrong with the modeling? And again, this is like a dummy model that we've built. And in particular on holdout strategy, making checks that, for example, the priors are not dominating the posteriors is like extremely important. So I would double check again with your data science team or the vendor, whoever you're working of like, is this actually correct here? But ultimately, you will always have an MMM there where you have some channels where you understand, okay, hey, I can actually believe those, and some channels that you just need to test, because if you have been how you basically previously ran your entire marketing mix, a lot of people always have like the same channel or mix composition and just increase and decrease spend equally across every channel. And that actually does not create enough variance for any model to actually understand what is working, what is not working. Hence, incrementality testing is almost always part of an MMM and is actually needed in order to actually truly understand what is working. So breaking down the actual grade, so convergence, we don't have the sample stats stored. The recency training ends 2025 of like basically last year, right? So obviously the model is like 28 weeks stale. Again, this is just a dummy data. And that's why we actually only have data up until like last year, end of October. There's no holdout strategy, for example, stored. We actually do that for all of our models at BlueAlpha. And then this prior independence, which is like all 10 channels are flagged as prior dominated, right? Which basically means that the data influence on the shape parameters ranges between 0.01 to 0.47, which is actually that none of them cross the data-driven threshold that we said. Channel contributions are stable, right? And no two channels are actually perfectly correlated, which is good, but still that if we set priors and the posterior actually matches the priors completely is a bit worrisome. Reconciliation applied via platform, okay, then it also sounds great. And then search Adstock live of 1.8 weeks is too long for paid search effects, right? And that in particular, if you look at a more performance or like bottom of funnel channel, that effect should be almost same week, not even days. And then, for example, for TV Scientific, that the half-life of 1.35 weeks is suspiciously short for CTV, which again, both reflect prior poll and actually like reflect the prior poll, which is like the prior independence non-insured and actually not learned values. So there will definitely be some tests that we should like slot in for those channels. Okay, moving on, prior dominated channel list, showing you all the channels here: Google Ads, Meta, Google Ads Shopping, Google Ads Search, Agentic, which is influencer marketing. Then we have Roku, TV Scientific, Vibe, and so on. Channel flags, all channel flags saturated at around like 65 to 75% per the model with low marginal ROI everywhere. Internally consistent but reflects the priors more than the data. Again, most of the channels also have an ROI below 1, right? Which is either truly unprofitable on last touch basis or paid as being under attributed relative to baseline, which is actually like 72% of last week's revenue, which is high, potentially plausible, but potentially not. So again, good way of actually like testing. And then the two ad stocks that we pointed out that are too long or either too short. A use freely channel list actually gives us a recommendation of none, which is great because sometimes models try to make up insights that are not there. So it's a good check actually here that the skill is built in such a way that it doesn't like start to produce fake insights. And if none of the channels are to be used freely, that is a finding by itself as well, which might not be the insight that we wanted to hear, but it's still a finding at the end of the day. So the recommended actions before actually acting are: retrain with more recent window. Okay, dummy data again, persist holdout metadata training time. So actually make sure, do we have holdout? Do we even do back testing? BlueAlpha, we actually do both of these things that then feed into our model health score. And then tighten priors only where you actually have causal evidence, and otherwise actually use uninformative priors or incrementality tests to inform them. And lastly, incrementality tests. And now it's actually handing off to the trust router function. And I will be back once this loaded as well. All right, we're back after the second skill, the trust router actually loaded. So again, we kind of knew that no channels routes to trust MMM. Every channel's posterior confidence interval is wide enough that single channel relocations of meaningful size shouldn't be acted on without validation. 3 channels are clean enough, then the incrementality test would be productive. So we should validate those first. The other 7 have weak data influence and or material confound, so the model itself can speak credibly there. They either need a restructured spend test or channel merge before training, which is interesting. So looking at this, Google Ads shopping, right? Validate first. There's also shows you, like, for example, what the max confounding correlation is, which is Roku with 62%. Highest data influence in the model, large spend variation, only medium confound. So we should definitely test Google Shopping. Then Meta and search are followed. For Agentio, it actually says not enough data. Agentio is an interesting one. It's influencer marketing, so we can actually design an incrementality test, but we can use like almost a pulsing strategy with the MMM to flesh out the insights and then rank by the other ones. Okay, so looking at this, trust the MMM list, again, none, we established this already. And then it actually starts to look at, okay, these are the 3 channels that we should validate first, right? Actually starts to test is built from prior current weekly spend times models median ROI. MD is 50 of the lift. MD is like minimal detectable effect. Duration is 4 plus 2 times the Adstock half-life rounded up. Interesting. We'll actually be releasing an entire incrementality testing MCP as well, because this is just like, I would say, over thumb calculations, which can work, but we can definitely get more granular and like more precise on it instead of having a 50% MDE, right? Because that's super high, to like get the test design down to like maybe 5% MDE or even less than that, in order to ensure that if we do make changes, we actually are measuring accurately. So if we hand this off to the incrementality test runner skill, these are the model insufficient lists with the different paths to actually like fix it. Okay, great. And then puts together a summary for the marketing leaders, and then also the side quests that I put in terms of like MMM launch timing. So when impact actually shows up after a spend change. And what we look at here is the half-life, the decay, right? And then start to actually look into the into like the saturation curves and the decay rate of like, if we launch something now, when should we actually start to see the full impact? Now you can read this is that after week 1 for Google Ads, we should actually see 50% of the impact. And then after week 3 to 4, actually 80. And then week 7 to 95%. It's actually interesting because, and also the model established before that there's like a 1.5 week half-life, which is probably not 100% correct for like Google Shopping, because it's like, or Google Search and Google Shopping, because it's like so bottom of funnel that this should actually be rather days. Meta could be interesting, right? And could actually be right of like a half-life, but this just gives you an idea. And ultimately when we test and we design an incrementality test, you will exactly be able to see that as well. And then you can start to infuse that into the MMM as additional information. Okay, priority list, search, Meta, and shopping, that makes sense. And then given us also like a weekly ramp of like validate our first channels in order to like, what should we actually do? Skipping a little bit over this, looking at reporting implications, performing some history checks, giving some caveats, and then actually building the MMM test roadmap for Q2 2026, where it actually puts together a test budget, concurrent test cap of like 2, when to start, when the quarter actually ends, and then also the business priorities, right? So for example, Meta, because it found it had the lowest ROI at 0.83, but the highest spend at 41K per week. So mostly likely candidate for leadership scrutiny. But again, you can iterate within Claude on all of this, right? So if this is not the current situation your business is in, just give it a ping and tell it, hey, feed it more context. That's the beauty of it, of instead of just looking at a pure dashboard, that you can actually talk to your data. Prioritize candidate list, we talked about this, and then actually giving you a calendar in an almost like ASCII form of like when to actually launch what. And again, on the entire incrementality testing side of like how to test, like you can do holdouts, you can obviously also like increase or decrease spend, do an uplift of like increasing spend, and then it says like here 20% control region. You should definitely either talk to your data science team to set up a good geolift tool test. We also do that, and again, we'll also be releasing an incrementality testing MCP, where with your input and the methodology that BlueAlpha actually builds, you will be able to actually design your own test as well. Pre-stage test cards, okay, sure, that makes sense, thank you. And then what did make the cut and is actually going to be pushed into Q3 plus backlog are the other channels where we have insufficient data. And then it just wraps up that the model is actually C-grade descriptive tool, not a decision grade prediction tool yet, because we have like highly prior dominated channels across all 10 channels that we have. And ultimately, that's why we should start to go into Q2 and fire 4 tests to where we look at, for example, at meta, shopping, and search as the largest channels, and then start to like fill in the other ones. If you want me to rerun the roadmap with different budget, concurrency gap, or priority ranking, just say what to change right here. If there's different insights that you have, just talk to it. And otherwise, I hope you can also see here all the different like skills that we actually did run. Obviously, we have like 10 total MMM skills, but just for the sake of this tutorial, showing you a quick glimpse of like how this actually should all work together. And I hope this is useful, and I talk to you very soon. Thank you.